It looks like we have a pretty good attendee list already, so we can go ahead and get started, and then we can catch up with anybody if they have any questions, or if anybody misses anything and they have questions later about something that's already been discussed, we can address those at the end of the call. There will be time for questions then. So thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. Like I said, this is the NAMI Texas Day of Action 2 briefing session. So we're going to go over a number of things in preparation for the second day of action, which is happening this upcoming Friday, which is March 5th, between the hours of 10 and 3. Of course, you will not be required, or nobody's going to be asked to be there for that duration of the event. It'll be broken out into 30-minute increments for legislative outreach sessions. More on that later. And this is all probably information you already have, but more on that later. But first, let's go over a real quick agenda. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the hosts of this call. So myself and Greg are going to introduce ourselves. Then we're going to move into a couple of talking points, things that you can discuss during your days of action with your legislators. We've identified a number of bills and the legislators or policymakers with whom they are associated. So if a legislator sits on a particular committee, this in a bill is talking about something relevant, an issue relevant to that committee. We've provided that information so you can bring that to your policymaker that you're meeting with and hopefully increase the efficacy of our outreach session. We're going to go over role assignments. This is some information that's been distributed previously about who facilitates the call or who leads the call. There's also somebody who provides talking points and somebody who tells their story. We will go over all those role assignments, and hopefully by the end of this evening or tomorrow, maybe before Wednesday evening, you guys will be able to assign roles for your group outreach. Greg and I will review a sample script. So we've developed one specifically for a representative that's going to be spoken to this day of action, a talking point relevant to this day of action. So it'll be a good baseline for upon which to build any talking points that you may have for your policymakers. And then at the very end, we'll have time for any questions or concerns you may have about the day of action, preparations for, or anything like that. So without further ado, introductions. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Greg Hansch. I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Texas. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thank you, Matthew, for putting together this fantastic gathering. This is a really important way for us to connect in advance of our legislative outreach events that are coming up, both the one on Friday as well as the ones that are coming up later in the legislative session. So we appreciate you. We appreciate your time and your interest in engaging in mental health advocacy. You know, I've been doing this mental health advocacy work professionally for a while now, and I have to say, you know, when folks who are personally impacted by these issues are trained on how to tell their stories effectively and are trained on the messaging and talking points that we want to use to advance our priorities, those individuals on the ground level are much more effective at advocating than, you know, any professional lobbyist type is in their day-to-day work. So it's really important that we have you working side by side and hand in hand with us on advancing our legislative agenda. So we appreciate that you want to be involved, and we're looking forward to this event tonight and moving the ball forward at the meetings on Friday.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. And my name is Matthew Lovett. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm the Peer Policy Fellow with NAMI Texas. I am been charged with organizing and facilitating the days of action. So hopefully you've received a number of emails from me by this point, but if you haven't, please do let me know so we can get you caught up with what's happening and provide you all the information you need to have a successful day of action. Lastly, on the introductions piece, NAMI Texas Days of Action, it's important to know kind of what we're doing, and Greg hit a lot of these points already, but advocacy is essential to improving the access and availability of mental health care across Texas. Advocates who are able to effectively share their stories of mental illness and recovery can help to shape the policies and that determine the quality of care provided to those most in need. Simply, advocacy is one of the best ways to ensure that every Texan living with mental illness has the opportunity for recovery. So NAMI Texas Days of Action are one way to support you in your direct advocacy with policymakers. to provide you with an opportunity to share your stories of mental illness and recovery, express concerns about the state of mental health care in Texas, and provide potential policy solutions. So the next day of action, the second day of action, is this Friday, like I mentioned, on March 5th. And we will also be hosting subsequent days of action and the last Friday of March and April as well. The last day of action in April will all be preceded by a rally, which would be really fun. FYI, the registration for the third day of action will open up the day after this second day of action. So it'll be Saturday, March 6th. The registration for the third day of action will open. That registration period will be a little bit shorter than previously, only because we lost a week, essentially, because of Snowpocalypse 2021. So we're going to have a truncated registration period. But that's why I'm informing you now, just so you can be aware of what's coming, and we can make sure to bring as many people as possible along for that day of action as well. Anyways, in the email distributed last week, I provided each outreach group the time of their legislative appointment and the person to whom they would be speaking if it was scheduled. I've since had an opportunity to schedule a couple more meetings, so that information should have been provided to you. If it has not, likely that means I haven't been able to schedule that appointment just yet. But I'm doing my best. I'm still working those connections. Hopefully we can get you scheduled for an appointment soon. I also provided a sample script. We will be going over that sample script in addition to a number of bills that you can talk to your legislators about in order to kind of, like Greg said, move the ball forward in terms of policy this Friday at the second day of action. So with all of that said, we can roll right into, this is Greg.
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a moment here. This will be really quick. I want to thank Neurocrine for sponsoring the NAMI Texas Days of Action and upcoming mental health rally that we're having on April 30th. These events, as you know, are free to participate in, but they are not free for NAMI Texas to implement. So we are very grateful to Neurocrine. This is late breaking that we secured this sponsorship from Neurocrine, and we thank them for supporting our efforts to advance mental health reform in Texas in the current legislative session. There are some other potential sponsorships that we're working on. If anyone is interested in sponsoring NAMI Texas Days of Action or mental health rally, please reach out. It's not too late to lock in a sponsorship. You can reach out to me by email or by phone, and we would love to have a conversation with you or any of your contacts about creating a custom sponsorship package. So thanks again, Neurocrine. We appreciate your support.
Excellent. Okay, so now into the meat of the conversation, so to speak. As I'm sure most of you are aware, there are two chambers of the Texas legislature, the Senate and the House. Last day of action, we were able to speak mostly to senators, but we did have some representatives present. This week, it's kind of, this month, it's kind of opposite. We're speaking to mostly House representatives, but we do have a couple senators. So for those of you who are speaking with a senator this coming Friday or their staff, we wanted to cover a couple policy issues or bills that are relevant to NAMI Texas's kind of policy priorities, and we think advance or move the ball forward in terms of mental health policy for this coming session. So we're going to talk about a couple Senate bills first. The first one is SB 325, which is authored by Senator West from Dallas. So SB 325 allows school districts to develop models for the delivery of mental health programs to students and families in schools. This could also be known as like the school-based healthcare clinics. So what they are is collaborative or cooperative healthcare clinics that have primary care, dental care, and mental health services all in one location. So they're co-located. They can be on campus, but more often than not, they are just off campus. So there is no formal policy in place for the administration or the development of the models for these school-based school-based healthcare clinics. SB 325 tries to grant schools the authority to develop models to put in place to provide these collaborative services to students. Currently, school districts have to kind of go on their own and do it. Now they would have the ability to be more coordinated in their efforts, so to speak. So this would be particularly important to Senator Betancourt. He is somebody that we haven't quite secured a legislative outreach meeting for just yet. However, the wheels are still turning on this, and we hope to get something nailed down with their staff shortly. So if you do, or when we do nail something down with Senator Betancourt's staff, this would be a good potential bill to discuss with them, because obviously he is on the education committee. He is kind of one of the doorkeepers, so to speak, or gatekeepers to this legislation actually making it to the Senate floor. So this would be a valuable piece of legislation to talk to him about. I provided a couple of bullet points. These are talking points that you can use in your sample script. I've done this for all the bills that we're going to be covering tonight. And this information, keep in mind, will be distributed to all Day of Action registrants tomorrow morning, in addition to the sample script that Greg and I are going to go over. So I won't take the time to read these bullet points, the talking points out to you, but they will be available to you. And they're great ways to kind of get the conversation going and to demonstrate the importance of this kind of legislation. So the next bill we have, SB 672. It was co-authored by Senator Buckingham and Senator Campbell. It provides Medicaid reimbursement for collaborative mental health and primary care services. So this is a nice build on from the Senate bill we just talked about by Senator West, SB 325, where they're providing collaborative care in schools. SB 672 allows collaborative care to be Medicaid reimbursable. So individuals who receive services through their Medicaid health plan will be able to bill for collaborative care, which again is that multidisciplinary service, so primary care, mental health care, and perhaps dental as well. This would be particularly relevant if we were speaking with any senators who are on the Health and Human Services Committee. Unfortunately, there are none. However, any senator this would be a valuable talking point. This is high on NAMI Texas's priorities list, so it's definitely something to consider talking to them about if you're speaking with a senator. This is actually a House bill that we're going to present to you later as well. So this is a good all-purpose bill to talk about with your policymakers. Especially true if you have experience receiving collaborative care, or if you believe that collaborative care would have been something beneficial to you or your loved one. And even more so if you have been at some point in time in your life on Medicaid, where you're receiving services through that insurance coverage. Okay, next bill is, SB 674. This is also authored by Buckingham, and it prohibits Medicaid managed care organizations, MCOs, from implementing prior authorization protocols that require physicians to obtain approval before dispensing preferred antipsychotic medications to individuals living with SMI. In other words, prior authorizations. Now this, I will tell you, this is a NAMI Texas championed bill. We were highly involved in the development of this bill language, so it is very, very high, if not at the top of our priorities list this coming legislative session. So if you are so compelled to talk about prior authorizations and antipsychotic medications, this may just be the bill for you. It's worth noting that although this bill, is on the Senate side, you can also speak to your House representatives about it, because in theory, or hopefully, it does make it over to the House side as well. So providing them some information on this Senate bill up front would help prepare them for when it does make it across. We have a lot of reason to believe that this bill will make it through the Senate side pretty quickly. And so it'll likely end up on the House side pretty soon after the session, after they really start hearing bills in committee. So if we were to focus this legislation on a particular senator, since this is an insurance issue, it would likely go to Business and Commerce. Unfortunately, we don't have any senators on our Day of Action registrant list that sit on Senate and Commerce. So again, a good all-purpose bill, although there's nobody in particular that we can target with this one.
Hey, Matthew, I just wanted to jump in here. In looking at this bill, SB 674, I actually anticipate that this bill will likely go through the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate rather than Business and Commerce. So I apologize for not catching that before, but I think we can potentially look to see who we have meetings with, who is on the HHS committee for Friday, and make sure they have the information that they need about this bill.
Okay, and thank you for clarifying that point. And this is worth mentioning. Business and Commerce typically handles commercial insurance. Health and Human Services typically handles Medicaid. So that's the distinction. That was a slip up. Unfortunately, as shown in the previous slide, we don't have, none of the senators on our contact list for this day of action actually sit on Health and Human Services. So that's one kind of downside, but again, a really important bill for NAMI Texas, and potentially any registrants, especially if they've had any trouble obtaining their any kind of medications for serious mental illness. If you or a loved one has been taking any antipsychotic medications, obviously you're aware that suddenly switching those medications or being kicked off a particular medication can be life-altering. It can have pretty severe consequences. So if this is something that's meaningful to you, that means something to you, and you would like to talk with your representative or your senator, please feel free to do so. Again, this is authored by Buckingham, so we have reason to believe it's going to move through the Senate side pretty quickly, and it will likely be over on the House side within the month or two. So maybe late March, early April. Moving on from the Senate, we have the House of Representatives next. So HB 313, this is by Representative Collier. And this is Representative Collier, somebody we spoke with last day of action. So unfortunately, we're not speaking with her again this time. Maybe we will in future days of action, but still a really important bill. And you can see that it will probably be referred to Homeland Security and Public Safety. Representative Goodwin sits on that committee. She would be a good legislator to talk to about HB 313. Representative Goodwin is on our list of outreach this session. And actually, I believe she's actually going to be on the call. So this would be a really cool thing to talk to her about. So HB 313 expands training requirements for mental health officers to include TBI and combat-related trauma and PTSD. Pretty self-explanatory. For veterans or individuals suffering from PTSD or traumatic brain injury, we want to make sure that any law enforcement interaction is as beneficial as possible, or at least damaging as possible. So we want to make sure that law enforcement is properly trained to support individuals with PTSD or any kind of traumatic brain injury. As I mentioned, Representative Goodwin would be a good legislator to target with HB 313. Next, this is HB 1114. This is the companion to SB 324, I believe it was, the Senator West bill that we opened up this evening with, regarding school-based health clinics. Same issue. We want to make sure that students or individuals or families, that receive services through a school-based clinic, they have access to mental health care in addition to primary care and dental care. So this is a great way to allow schools the autonomy to develop models for the delivery of collaborative care that they otherwise wouldn't have. So a really important way to increase access to mental health services for students. Also, another talking point that we have is that collaborative care, school-based health clinics are an opportunity to offset any kind of stigma that prevents adolescents from seeking mental health services. So since these services are generally provided off-site, a student is more likely to go and try and seek those services because they don't have to be afraid of maybe one of their colleagues or maybe one of their friends from seeing them enter into the mental health clinic. So they're more likely to receive that care, which is another benefit of school-based health clinics. So feel free, Representative Allison, who I actually just confirmed our appointment with today. If you received that, hopefully you received that email confirming that appointment for the group members. NAMI San Antonio, all the group members are from representing by NAMI San Antonio. So Representative Allison would be a good person to speak to about HB 1114. If this is an issue that's relevant to your group or somebody's particularly passionate about, or has some experience with school-based health clinics, or if they believe that themselves or their loved ones may have benefited from school-based healthcare, this would be a great bill to talk to with Representative Allison. The third House bill is HB 1413, which lowers the qualifying age criteria to receive peer support services from 21 to 14 years old. So NAMI Texas, and along with numerous other mental health organizations or advocacy organizations, are huge proponents of peer support services for a number of reasons. They're relatively inexpensive to provide. Peer support is non-clinical in nature, so it's a great way for a peer to connect with a client in a non-clinical way. So there's like less of a power dynamic or power differential that may alter the nature of the relationship. And it's just generally a great way to provide additional support and resources to individuals who are early in recovery, who need help navigating the mental health care system. Typically, a therapist is not going to be able to provide that kind of support to a client. So peer supports are obviously a great adjunct service for those clinical kinds of care. So this bill would go through Human Services on the House side, and we have meetings with both Representative Shaheen and Representative Hinojosa, who both sit on that committee. So HB 1413 would be a great bill to talk to with those two representatives, or to any House rep, again, if this is an issue that's particularly important to you. Do you think it's important and you want to see succeed so more people have access to peer support services? All right, so in addition to Senate bills and House bills, we have brought forth a couple of budgetary ideas, because right now, like literally early today, over the next couple of days, the Senate Finance and House Appropriations Committees will be meeting to discuss the budget. So we wanted to provide you with a couple ideas if budgetary issues are your thing, or if you think it's really important, or if there's a service that's not funded to the level that you think is appropriate for Texas. This might be something that you talk about with these people in terms of financing. So making sure that there's plenty of money in the mental health care system. On the Senate side, Senator Betancourt sits on Senate Finance, so he would be a good person to target with any budget issues. And on the House side, Representative Toth and Representative Howard would be great people to speak to as well. So one of NAMI Texas's big initiatives on the budget side is continued investment in the state hospital redesign and expansion. So Austin State Hospital, San Antonio State Hospital, Rusk, there are a number of others that are involved in this plan. Unfortunately, Health and Human Services needs about $350 million to complete those projects. I'm sure you're aware of the budgetary situation in the state of Texas right now, so there's a little bit of skepticism or reluctance to buy in or to allocate that kind of money to the state hospital system. So the more people that speak up about the need for funding for the state hospital, the better. I've been speaking about it a lot lately. I would certainly appreciate your support in that regard, and NAMI Texas would, of course, as well, only because it's such an important service for so many people. In addition to the state hospital, increased Medicaid reimbursement for peer support services. So again, for those of you who are familiar with peer support services, recognize its value. You're probably aware also that the reimbursement rate for peer services is very low, about $7.50 per 15-minute increment, which about $25 an hour, almost makes it unsustainable to employ peers, because the reimbursement is so low that clinics or agencies often have to eat the majority of the cost of peer services, just because MCOs or the state don't pay back an adequate amount for that kind of care. So if we can increase the rate of peer support services reimbursement, then we can almost incentivize the use of peer services, which is going to save the state money and also provide a higher quality of care to the individual receiving those services. So that's something that NAMI Texas is working on pretty extensively lately, is encouraging Health and Human Services in the state to increase the reimbursement rate for peer services. Any support you can provide behind that would be certainly appreciated as well. The third and final budgetary consideration would be increased investment, or continued investment, in the Texas Child Mental Health Care Consortium. Now, this is not my area of expertise. Our intern, Anna, is the one who focuses on early intervention and adolescent mental health. But safe to say, this is a very important thing. Obviously, if you can catch mental health concerns earlier in the life cycle, you can prevent all sorts of downstream consequences, whether it be from untreated care or from worsening mental health concerns. Really important issue. You can increase students' academic achievement or engagement, and that has all sorts of downstream benefits as well in terms of employment, family relationships are improved, all sorts of really cool things. So if early intervention in childhood mental health is your jam, then continued investment in the Child Mental Health Care Consortium may be something you speak with, especially if you're speaking to Senators Betancourt or Representatives Toth and Howard. Okay, that was a mouthful, guys. If you have questions, I've seen a couple of hands go up since I started this spiel about the bills. We can certainly address those at the end of the call. I think we're moving through this at a nice clip, so we should have ample time. The next thing we want to do is talk about role assignment. So on Wednesday or Thursday of last week, when I sent out group emails, I provided 2 documents, a sample script and also a handout with role assignment. Typically how outreach meetings go is that somebody takes like the facilitator or the lead role. There's somebody who is the messenger. So they're the ones who delivers the talking points, maybe citing some data or statistics, or just generally speaking about the benefit of any kind of service. And then the last person is the storyteller, and they share their lived experience with mental health or recovery in the context of whatever you guys are talking about. So if it's one of those bills we talked about, say, school-based healthcare, you can tell a story about your family members' inability to access services through their school and the consequences that perhaps were associated with it. Or alternatively, the good things that came from their ability to access mental health care through a school-based healthcare center. So you were provided all this information, hopefully you received it, you were provided all this information about the different functions of each role. We suggest that sooner rather than later, everybody get with their group, at least start exchanging some emails and assigning those roles. Some people who are a little bit more experienced with advocacy have conducted some legislative outreach previously. They may be more comfortable in a lead role, and some people who are a little bit less newer in terms of the advocacy may be more comfortable doing just a storyteller role. A storyteller role, although it's very personal and it's very impactful, it's a little bit maybe easier to focus on just that one element as opposed to navigating or traffic controlling the whole conversation. So if you're a little bit more familiar with advocacy, or if you get a little bit more experience with legislative outreach, you may choose the facilitator role. We are going to let you guys decide who does what. So we trust you in making those decisions. But we want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is like the generally recognized best way and most efficient way to conduct a legislative outreach meeting is by assigning these roles and kind of sticking to a script. Speaking of which, we have a sample script developed for you guys, and this will be distributed tomorrow morning when I send out all these supporting materials. But what we're going to do tonight is just go over it real quick. Greg is going to play the lead. Since there's only 2 of us, Greg is going to play the lead and the messenger, and I'm going to play the storyteller. Greg, are you ready?
I am ready, Matthew.
Okay, and just to FYI, everybody, I've kind of made some adjustments from the last day of action presentation of the sample script. Basically, last time you just had to watch me and Greg read the script. This time I provided a slide that I pulled directly from the NAMI Smarts advocacy training, where it talks about the different elements in legislative outreach. So the introduction or making the connection is step 1. Greg will cover all that, and then I'll talk about talking points next, and then the story, so forth. So we have a little bit of a guide, and we can show you exactly where all these different elements come in. With that said, Greg?
Tell me action when it's action time.
Action.
Hello, Representative Howard. I'm Greg Hansch from Austin. We're members of NAMI Central Texas, part of America's largest grassroots mental health organization, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We really appreciate your taking the time to meet with us. We know that you're very busy. Representative Howard, before we talk about some important issues affecting your constituents who are affected by mental illness, we'd like for you to know that we very much appreciate your many years of dedicated service in our legislature. We also appreciate that as a former Eanes ISD school board member and having done work in preventing teen pregnancy, your experience in working with youth provides you with valuable insight in ways to better support those who are most in need. With that in mind, we're here because we want to urge you to support improvements in access and availability of early intervention mental health services in Austin and across the state of Texas. HB 14 allows school districts to develop models for the delivery of mental health programs for students and families in schools. Primary care physicians are often the first people to recognize mental health concerns in adolescent patients. Unfortunately, there is little coordination between primary and mental health care providers. The problem is particularly pronounced for students and families who are only able to receive mental health supports through their school. A lack of coordination between primary care providers and mental health professionals in schools contributes to the mental health crisis in Texas. So allowing school districts to develop models for the delivery of primary and mental health care in schools can improve access to mental health services for students who might not otherwise be able to obtain needed care. Furthermore, providing collaborative care in schools can help to offset the stigma associated with mental illness, as students seeking services from cooperative clinics will have an added degree of confidentiality in the circumstance that led to them seeking services.
Representative Howard, if I may, my name is Matthew Lovitz. I'm from Austin. I'm a member of NAMI Texas, and my child is living with a mental health condition. I believe HB 1114 would greatly improve his and other students' ability to access essential mental health services. When he was growing up and when he was in middle school, he was a straight A student. And despite only being in 9th grade, a starting offensive lineman on the high school varsity football team, a real all-star for sure. Unfortunately, that all changed when he started to experience mental health concerns. His grades and extracurriculars really suffered. He started using alcohol and cannabis to manage his anxiety. Between his sophomore and junior year in high school, he was arrested for possession of a controlled substance, then referred to an inpatient psychiatric hospital for suicidal ideations. Despite the difficulties he experienced, it was because of these difficulties that we were able to recognize the severity of his needs. My son's been receiving case management and counseling services through the local mental health authority here in Austin. And thanks to his exceptional care team, his grades have improved, his football team won state, and he is set to graduate in the top 10% of his class. Unfortunately, these improvements came at a significant cost to our family. Due to the nature of my work, I have to take a full day off from work to take him to his case management and psychiatric appointments. If he'd been able to access services at or near his school, our family would have been much better able to support our son through this challenging period of his life. I'm sure that providing other students access to school-based cooperative healthcare services would improve the health and well-being of countless children in Texas.
So Representative Howard, these stories, like the one that Matthew just shared, illustrate the need for greater coordination between physicians and school-based mental health professionals in Travis County and beyond. The hundreds of thousands of youth in Texas living with mental health conditions deserve to have the opportunity for recovery. The people in our state need your vote to protect access to mental health care. Can we count on your support for HB 1114? Thank you so much, Representative Howard. We very much appreciate you taking the time to hear our concerns. If it's okay with you, we'd like to follow up with you and your staff with materials on this important issue of access to mental health care. Is it okay for NAMI Texas to provide you with a one-pager on HB 1114 via email? Great. Well, thank you again, Representative Howard, and please let us know if we can be a resource to you in the future.
End scene. Whatever the hand gesture is, there it is.
That's it. Yeah.
Excellent job. And I apologize, Greg. There were a number of typos in that script, and I'll make sure to clean those up before I distribute the script to everybody tomorrow morning. But excellent job. Thank you for rolling with the punches there, Greg. Okay, so that is the end of our formal presentation this evening. It looks like we do have a number of questions. We would be happy to start fielding some of those. Okay, I see one here from Sarah, and this was asked a number of at the beginning of the call. This is off topic, but when will NAMI Smarts training be? Unfortunately, I don't think NAMI Texas has scheduled any NAMI Smarts trainings for the foreseeable future. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, and it's important here to distinguish between NAMI Smarts trainings and NAMI Smarts classes. So NAMI Smarts classes are what we use to actually train people on how to be an advocate, whereas NAMI Smarts trainings are training people how to teach others how to become advocates. With respect to, I assume the question is about NAMI Smarts classes. So regarding that, as Matthew mentioned, we don't have any that are currently on the schedule. We intentionally did a lot of NAMI Smarts classes before the legislative session because we know how busy things are during the actual session. So I think we had about 7 or 8 classes in the fall and early winter. We taught NAMI Smarts to over 100 people. So yeah, there aren't any currently on the calendar. That said, it's possible that an affiliate, I would check in with your affiliate about this and see if they're planning anything. And then regarding NAMI Smarts trainings, a little bit of good news on that. NAMI National is about to be offering a NAMI Smarts training. Matthew has applied to be a participant in that training, so he'll be able to teach NAMI Smarts classes once he completes the training. And then there are a couple affiliates, late breaking, I won't announce who those affiliates are, but there are a couple affiliates who have asked to have their folks trained to teach NAMI Smarts. And I'll be circling back with those who reached out to me on that today or tomorrow. But that'll allow more affiliates the ability to offer the NAMI Smarts classes. So I'm sorry, I apologize if folks missed the opportunity to take NAMI Smarts in the fall and early winter, but rest assured there will be many more NAMI Smarts classes in the future. It just may not be in the next month or two.
So for those of you who have raised your hands, if you could type in your questions in the Q&A box, that would be supremely helpful. I do have a question here from Columba. School districts would not help children with mental illness. Do you have a question or concern about what we can do for that, Columba? Like how can we advocate to improve the quality of care? I think we discussed a couple of bills that might help us do that in terms of supporting school-based health centers. If you have other ideas about how mental health care for adolescents or students can be improved, we certainly field your suggestions. Now might not be the most appropriate time for that, but when you talk with your group members about in terms of the planning for the day of action, in terms of identifying the topics you want to discuss with your policymaker, this might be a good opportunity to identify some additional things or suggestions you may have for them with regards to how to improve the care provided to students.
Yeah, and I'll say, none of the 6 or 7 issues that we presented over the course of the last half hour, so none of those are things that anyone is required to advocate for. Like if you're just not a believer in school-based mental health services, like you're more or maybe you're more passionate about other mental health policy topics, like it's okay to sit that one out. You don't have to. We're not telling anyone they have to advocate on school-based mental health care or any other issue. And additionally, I will say, the issues that we just shared information on are not necessarily the only issues that you're limited to advocate on. Like in the last day of action, we had several groups, identify specific bills that they were really passionate about that we didn't cover in the pre-briefing for the first day of action. Like, for example, I know we have some Clubhouse folks on the call. Like, we didn't really talk about Clubhouses in the trainings for the first day of action or for this one. But, the Clubhouse folks know what they're wanting to accomplish, and they brought talking points up about Clubhouses in the meetings that they had. And that was great. And I think that message was well received. So it's something to determine with your group members, the folks that you're going to be having meetings with or you're meeting with on Friday. Determine what are the issues that you really want to focus on in that Friday meeting, whether it's something that we just presented information on or whether it's something outside of the short list that we just covered.
Thank you for adding that clarification, Greg. I appreciate it. Ron McCracken provided I guess more of a statement than a question here. He feels he'd be particularly adept at providing a lived experience, a story of his lived experience with PTSD and anxiety disorder. Ron, if you haven't already connected with your group, I would suggest you do so and share that with them, because if PTSD or anxiety are one of the issues your group wants to focus on, you would definitely be a good candidate for a storyteller role. If not, that's okay too. What we can do, what I can do is try and help provide you with some additional support for your personal advocacy outside of Day of Action. So provide you some ways in which to get engaged with any other bills or issues or committee hearings around PTSD and anxiety disorder, where your personal story might be valuable and help to guide policymakers in their decision making. So Ron, if you haven't connected with your group, or for some reason, if you haven't received an email connecting you with your group from me, what I will do is after this call this evening, and I will check our roster and make sure that I send another email to you connecting you to your group. Either way, I'll certainly check in with you after this call this evening. Charlene, HB 413 isn't one of the bills that we spoke about. We did speak about HB 1413, which relates more to peer support services and the qualifying age criteria. So reducing it from 21 to 14. I'm not quite sure. I can't navigate away from the PowerPoint that's in front of you right now, only because this is on my screen. I'm sharing it. I'm not sure off the top of my head what HB 413 is. So I can't say for sure if it limits funding to public education or not. If you want to follow up with me after this call, we can certainly dig into the issue a little bit more. Let me see. I don't know if I have access to the chat feature. Let me see here. Oh, yeah, here it is. Let me put my email address in the chat box, and you can email me after this evening's call, and we can dig into it a little bit more if you feel like that's appropriate. There we go. Okay. There's my email, and that applies to anybody, not just Charlene. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me via email, and we can certainly talk offline.
There may be a few other comments in the chat or questions in the chat for us to look at. Remember, folks, if you have questions, try to put them in the Q&A, because that's a lot easier for us to keep track of. Carrie has a question. Carrie points out Representative Tony Rose. She said serves on HHSC. I think Carrie probably means the House Committee on Public Health. Representative Rose is the vice chair of that committee. So that's if folks are meeting with Representative Rose, that's certainly something to be aware of. Also, I will say about Representative Rose, she is a great ally for us, and we have a strong relationship and have worked very closely with their office over many years on a number of different issues related to mental health policy. So she's very much in our corner. Carrie also asked Matthew, I don't know if you have any ideas on this, but should other state representatives be contacted to gain support for bills, like I guess outside of the specific ones that we have meetings set with on Friday?
Yeah, I think that's certainly valuable, connecting with other legislators to talk about your specific policy priorities or your affiliates' policy priorities. That's something that NAMI Texas does. It's like what we do on a daily basis is kind of building support or momentum behind particular issues. If you're compelled to do that as well, I would certainly suggest getting in contact, especially if you wish to represent your affiliate, getting in contact with your affiliate leaders, or if your affiliate has an advocacy committee, getting in contact with them, because they may have some insider knowledge about a particular office or representative or a contact inside that office to help facilitate that whole process. Greg, you also mentioned, or Carrie, I believe, mentioned Representative Rose, and I feel like this is a great doorway to talk about another concern that a couple of people have shared with me via email. There were like 80 registrants for Day of Action 2. We are trying to schedule approximately 20 legislative outreach meetings. the math doesn't square. There are more than 20 policymakers represented by those 80 registrants. In order to make it logistically possible and the best experience possible, we've had to kind of group people together. So people who have, for example, from NAMI Southern Sector Dallas, Representative Rose, we had one person register who their representative is Representative Rose. However, in that same group from NAMI Southern Sector Dallas, there are 2 or 3 people with another representative from that same district or from that same area who we grouped together just to make it more a smooth outreach experience, because Day of Action 1, there were a number of technical issues. People had to wait around while we broke everybody into breakout rooms. Some meetings got ended a little bit early just because of the quick turnover time, which we had to do to accommodate the number of meetings that we facilitated. So this time what we've had to do, or we've decided to do, is to combine some of those meetings. So Representative Rose's constituents are going to be partnering up with another representative's constituents to provide or conduct this legislative outreach. Hopefully what we will be able to do is rotate through all those policymakers in future days of action. So if we're speaking to, say, for example, Representative Rose, this day of action, we would be talking to another representative whose constituents are from NAMI Southern Sector Dallas next day of action. Hopefully that's clear. It's hard to kind of explain, and I hadn't really scripted this out to make sure it was really clear and concise. But what we've had to do, unfortunately, is combine groups. So unfortunately, you may not be speaking to your representative, but in future days of action, hopefully you will be. So hopefully that doesn't discourage you, and hopefully you're still going to be able to participate and support your affiliate members and your colleagues in terms of their advocacy. So,
and let me just add one quick thought in addition to to Carrie's question about how do we connect with other lawmakers besides like those who are in our particular geographic area, or even more specifically those who we are a constituent of. How do we connect with legislators more on a statewide basis? One of the best ways to do that is to engage in the legislative committee hearings that are happening on an ongoing basis, and that will be happening for most of the rest of the legislative session. So for example, there's a hearing coming up on Thursday in the House that is addressing among its agenda items the impact of COVID on mental health. And Matthew sent out an advocacy newsletter about that this morning. So good news, this legislative session, this is the first time this has ever been the case. You can engage in legislative hearings directly without being inside the Capitol. There's a formal process that you can use to submit written testimony to House committees. And it's really user-friendly. So you don't have to track down the email addresses of the various committee members. You just type your comments into one box, hit submit, and it goes to all the different committees. So it really kind of opens up the door for advocacy by people who aren't necessarily in Austin. And it allows your message to be heard by folks who represent areas across the state of Texas, not just in your specific geographic area. So engage in the legislative committee hearings to the extent that you can, and stay tuned for information that we will be and we have been sending out about the hearings.
Okay, so I've got a question here from Maryland. Are there any housing related bills or budgeting activity? Not specifically that we've presented this evening, Maryland. However, I will provide you with some good news. I have been advocating for step down in congregate housing in Senate Finance last Friday and my House Appropriations testimony this morning. And just before we jumped on this call, I didn't have to have an opportunity to receive the email, but the clerk of the House Appropriations Committee did email me back, like unprovoked, so to speak, about my testimony on step down in congregate housing. So hopefully there is going to be an opportunity, and I can follow up with you more after this call about the nature of the content of that email, what they're looking for, or additional ways we can advocate for housing related bills. All that said, it doesn't hurt to certainly talk about it, especially if you're going to talk about the state hospital system or any criminal justice related bills for people with mental illness. Obviously, step down housing or transitional housing is very important for both of those populations. So if you're going to talk about the state hospital expansion and redesign project, if you're talking about a budgetary issue, then there's an obvious connection to to access to step down and congregate housing or transitional housing. So it'd feel like it'd be a very easy thing to do, to drop that into the conversation, to share your personal story, and to advocate for it. Because even if it's not like a budget line item or a bill we have, dropping that information on your policymakers certainly will increase their awareness and might bring about an opportunity for future advocacy, much like what happened in my House Appropriations testimony today. I received an email from the clerk asking for additional information, or I believe that's what's in the email. I haven't had an opportunity to look at it, like I said, but the subject was about housing. So I imagine there are some requests in that email about housing. So even if there's not something that you talk about specifically in terms of a bill or a budgetary line item, certainly drop it in where you can, assuming everybody in your group is on board with that. And then that may open up doors for a conversation in the future around housing. Okay, so Ruth asks about particular recommendations for Rep. Ana Marie Ramos. I don't have any off the top of my head. I can certainly provide you with some ideas or suggestions outside of the bills that we've discussed this evening. If you reach out to me either tonight or tomorrow morning, I would be happy to provide you a little bit of information about Representative Ramos. You can provide that. You can access that information as well in terms of their history, committees they sit on, things that they're interested in. On last Wednesday or last Thursday, when I sent out that first organizing email, I did provide a link to the House of Representatives webpage where you can look up each representative and figure out more about their interests, do a little bit of research, figure out what things they might be interested in, where you can kind of frame your conversation or your outreach appointment to suit those interests. So hopefully, in theory, it's more effective. All right. So for those of you, NAMI San Antonio, I believe it is Representative Allison is the representative you're scheduled to meet. I think there are 6 of you, all of whom are represented by Representative Allison. Doug Beach is offering to facilitate or set up the Zoom meeting. Doug, if you could email that group separately outside of this call, that would be great, because I'm not quite sure. We only have 22 attendees here tonight. I'm not certain that all 6 of your group mates are here, but thank you for offering to schedule that Zoom session and facilitate that call. Many, many thanks. Okay, and Charlene, she asked about HB 413 earlier, is just saying she's very passionate here about all the bills and issues we're talking about. A lot of enthusiasm for mental health policy. She's willing to talk about all of it. So Charlene, I would suggest you connect with your group mates and talk about your experience and identify the role you'd like to play in your legislative outreach. And hopefully, hopefully it goes well. If you're unable to connect with your group mates, please feel free to contact me, and I will do my best to help facilitate those connections or provide you some additional support or guidance for how to be most effective in your legislative outreach. Okay. 1413, I'm sorry, Charlene clarified. So 1413 was about lowering the age criteria to receive peer support services from 21 to 14 years of age. For those of you who didn't know, I am a peer support specialist by trade. That's what I was doing prior to working for NAMI Texas. So this is an issue that's very important to me. Charlene, if you have questions about peer support services or the nature of HB 1413 or the specifics about it, please feel free to email me, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to discuss the bill in a little bit more depth than maybe is necessary right here. I'd be happy to do that. So please reach out to me. Okay, so it looks like we've gotten through all the questions. If you do have additional questions, let me go check the chat box real quick. Okay, it looks like Greg is monitoring the chat box pretty well. If you do have some additional questions, Greg and I will hang out for a few more minutes until 8 o'clock. Feel free to hang out, ask those questions if you want. If we're here answering questions and you submit a question after 8 o'clock, no worries. We'll certainly stick around and answer those questions. But as of right now, there are no more questions that I see, so you're welcome to go. Please do follow up with me if more questions do come to mind. I would be happy to answer them. I will also be sending all this information out we covered this evening, tomorrow morning, to the groups. So another opportunity to connect with your groups. I'll provide you with the sample script Greg and I went over with edits made, so there are fewer spelling errors and grammatical errors, and also the lists of bills for your reference. I will also link to the bill language in those documents. So if you're so inclined, you can just click right through and go to the actual bill language. If you're interested in seeing what the actual bill looks like, maybe doing a little bit more of a deep dive into the language, and or just seeing what a typical piece of legislation looks like, you're more than welcome to do so. And I'll provide you that information tomorrow morning. I will also be providing a link to the recording of this video. So if you want to go back through it to see something again, or you want to provide it to one of your group mates who wasn't able to attend, you're more than welcome to do so. With that said, thank you guys so much for being here this evening. I look forward to another successful day of action on Friday. If you do have any questions before then, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to support you in any way that I can. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful evening. Oh, Lori, it looks like your hand is raised. Oh, maybe she jumped off.
Yeah, we're not taking folks off mute, but folks are more than welcome to ask more questions in the Q&A or the chat. So we're here, I think, for another minute or two just to make sure everything's addressed. And Matthew, as I mentioned in the chat, you are the real MVP. Matthew is the convener of all of this and puts a lot of hard work into making this all happen. So round of applause for Mr. Matthew Lovett.
So quick note, if you guys ever find yourself in a position to facilitate a meeting, don't drink about 16 ounces of kombucha beforehand, because it's carbonated. It does create some gas in your stomach. So just be aware. So I apologize about my periodic excuse me's. It was because of the kombucha, nothing else, I promise.
Yeah, well, kombucha is delicious, but yeah, not, in moderation only.
Yeah.
So we're closing on a real good note here. Just some light banter for the folks who are still around. Hi everyone on Facebook. Hi everyone who's still in this webinar. Matthew, shall we call it an evening?
Yeah, let's. Again, guys, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to my email. It was provided in the chat box. Thank you so much.